County Planning Board meeting that is scheduled for December 5th, 2011. I want to go ahead and call the meeting to order and ask my fellow board members if they had a chance to take a look at the agenda for today's meeting. And are there any modifications there too, or do I hear a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
We got a motion to approve.
Second.
Have a second by Mr. Kessel. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Next order of business on the agenda is the approval of our minutes from our November 21st meeting. Has everyone received them first, and have you had a chance to review them? Are there any comments or corrections there too? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve from anyone?
Move to approve.
Motion by Mr. Hughes, a second.
Second.
Mr. Phillips seconds, okay. Any further discussion or comments regarding the minutes of our November 21st meeting? You haven't heard none. All signify your approval by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, all opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay, the next item on our agenda is a public hearing regarding the proposed language that has been published to implement a lighting ordinance for the county. It's also known as amendments to zoning ordinance regarding lighting standards, ZPH 2011-00082. I'll go ahead and open the public hearing process. I think everyone that I recognize everyone here today, I think everyone knows the rules. If you would, when you come up, if you don't mind, identify yourself, limit your comments to 3 minutes, and tell us where you're from. Who would like to be first? Well,
Good morning, everyone. I'm Bernard Arguier. I live in Asheville and Hawk Creek Valley. I've been here before. I think all of you recognize me. I have one question, I guess, of staff, just on applicability before I bring up a few points. Would multifamily residential units, duplexes and condos and apartments be impacted? Are they under the definition of commercial here? They're residential, even though they're built commercially and they put up parking lots and have parking lot lights,
The street lights and dusk to dawn lights would apply to them.
but their parking lot lights would not, even though they would affect everyone else commercially who puts up parking lot lights. Is that correct?
Right.
They have parking lots. I've been, some of the residential multifamily units have pretty big parking lots, and they're putting up the same kind of parking lots that are non-compliant elsewhere, but they'd be exempt then from those parking lots.
It would apply to industrial and commercial new development.
And is that true? And the churches issue, are churches considered commercial, or are they exempt for their parking lot lights?
Churches would be commercial.
They'd be commercial, okay. Well, that's one thing I think should be included is when you get into multi-unit residential structures, they have huge parking lots. They should have the same requirements as any other commercial. It's basically commercial. The residents aren't putting those lights in the parking lot. They should be included just like any other parking lot around town. In addition to that, on the dusk to dawn security lights, you've seen my emails. I really feel that you can't target just the ones Progress Energy installs, 12 feet or higher on a pole. You should target the light, not the installer. I was just at Lowe's yesterday. There was a guy at the counter. I know they sell them, but it's the first time I've seen it. He had 3 of those lights in big boxes ready to go home with them, and I can tell you he's not going to put a 20-foot pole up and install that light. He's going to put it on the side of his garage or his barn. And they produce the same amount of problem in light pollution and glare and trespass as the ones that Progress Energy installs. So there's a bit of an issue of fairness here. And the same thing with compliance. The staff brought up compliance issues. You don't have to run around town looking for these lights trying to turn people in. Asheville doesn't do that. they have the same requirement that they be sunsetted in 5 years. They wait for a complaint, and then they go after the person by sending them a letter saying your neighbor's complaining about your light, and they have to shield it or take it down. The shielding's not expensive. You can buy a little shield for those lights and put it over the light. They don't have to take it down. They can make it compliant. Renovations and replacements. I know this is following the non-compliance section of the standards, but with that section, you're given a very generous 6 months with which to replace your light. And with that generous a time for a simple fixture like a light, none of the old lights will ever become compliant. I think it should be exempted from that section. This lighting standard should be exempted, or we won't have an effective replacement of old lights with new ones. And the new ones don't cost any more than the old ones. Some of them are even cheaper. The full cutoff lights are now becoming the rage around the country, so they're very available and at very competitive prices. Signs and billboards, I know they're not covered here, but if you're going to, you may want to consider having those covered by putting them with down lighting and not up lighting. You can light a billboard from above and not from below like most of them are here in the county. And the last thing I have is the government exemption, the fact that the county has exempted itself from the ordinance. It's not going to look good with the public that you're going to ask everyone else to put up compliant lights, but you don't. Asheville doesn't exempt themselves. Of course, they do exempt downtown because they call it a historic district, but they do put in shielded ball field lights now, Asheville on new ball fields. County could do the same thing. That's really, the old style is almost inappropriate completely now because so many people complain about those kind of lights. So I think it would set a good example if the county led by example and made themselves comply with this very ordinance they're expecting everyone else to comply by. That's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernie. Appreciate it. Next.
Morning.
Morning.
My name is Jim Brown. I've spoken here before. I live in South Buncombe County, and I agree with what Bernie Arguer just mentioned about dusk to dawn lights. I think that is one of the main areas that needs to be consistent. But I also feel, or was really surprised at the last meeting to learn that the county and other government facilities would not be affected by this. I think in general, the people that are resistant to ordinances like this in the county will come out more strongly against it if the county exempts itself. So I would hope that you would reconsider that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Next. Mr. Gompert.
Good morning, Al Gompert, Buncombe County resident. I'd like to thank the board and the staff for tackling this issue. I think it's an important issue, and that you've taken a good first shot at it. I would like to also mention the holes that are in the ordinance as it's currently written, which Bernie has pointed out so well. Certainly to the homeowner, the dusk and dawn is a big issue. I see people put these things on the sides of their house, 8-10 feet above the ground, not 12 feet. And they're really obnoxious in a residential area. Athletic fields, if you go to the top of any of the peaks around here at night and look down, the biggest light pollution source is the mall, and the second one is whatever athletic field happens to have a game going on. And it is indiscriminate lighting. I mean, it's just blowing up everywhere where it should be downward directed. Certainly, sunset of old fixtures and the 180-day period doesn't work very well, and essentially means that the old fixtures will be around forever. And I think you somehow, either in this ordinance or in the sign ordinance, have to tackle the issue of electronic billboards. As any of us who drive up Merriman know, those things are really obnoxious. I remember there was one that used to be on 26. I'm not sure it's there anymore. It was about 10 feet from the roadway. It was an area that was totally dark, and that thing about blew you off the road if you came up there at night. I think that's something that should be taken care of. Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Good morning.
Good morning. Hi, nice to see you guys again. I'm Judy Maddox. I'm chair of the local Sierra Club, and just to let you know, we met last night, and I received an authorization to speak for the entire club. Actually, some of us tried to email you last night, but Gillian is out of the office until Wednesday, so I don't know when you'll receive the emails. But we're concerned. We again want to thank you for the work that you've done, but there are a number of concerns that we would like to address, and basically I'm repeating what has just been said before. But number one is the dusk to dawn lights. I think I told you before that I have to sleep with a blindfold. I am surrounded by 3 lights. One is on the side of a garage. One is that fancy, pretty lighting down in the street below me, and one is just this floodlight, and it's just a surround. And those folks are not shielding them, obviously. So one, don't limit it to 12 foot up in the air. None of these 3 are 12 foot up in the air. The second is the sunset clause. Certainly, you do want to look at when these things need to be replaced, that you don't want them replaced with the same, that they should sunset in 5 years. And the third is, of course, the 6 months, that you don't want to give permission for folks to replace the old in 6 months. They need to be compliant as soon as replacement issues come up. The fourth is to think about updating the sign ordinances, because as we've spoken before, effective lighting can be faced down, and much of the old lighting is facing up. Fifth is indeed the schools and the ballparks and everything in the county, that you do want all of that to follow the lead of compliance of these ordinances. And the sixth is the multi-unit residential, that it too should be subject to the ordinances. We're rooting for you, we believe in you, and we intend to follow. So we're living here with you guys, and we're in this together. So thank you for all of your help.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to come up and speak? Patty? Good morning.
I'm Patty Beaver. I work with the Council of Independent Business Owners, and we would just like to ask you guys to continue the discussion on this a little bit longer. We have a subcommittee that's currently looking at the commercial standards, and I think it'd be a good idea if the business community could just understand sort of, how this is going to affect them before it comes into reality. So if there's any way we could just give us a little bit more time to put that certainty into it, we'd really appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Patty. Anyone else? No, sir. Well, I think we've heard from everybody. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing portion of this agenda, and we'll open this up for discussion amongst our board. I'll just open up with this. We talked about this at our last meeting. We recognize, I think, that there's some areas within the proposed language that could be further addressed. It's my understanding that we were charged by the commissioners to look at lighting standards for commercial use only. We've had this discussion before, and we've taken into the residential piece, which I think all of us feel needs to be considered. It's just a matter, I guess, of how far we take it at this point in time. It is a work in progress. Granted, it may take some time to come back and revisit this once this is on the books and we move forward and try it out. I think we would learn a lot by doing so. But having said that, I'd like to open it up for discussion amongst my fellow board members and see what your pleasure is today. Who would like to go first?
I'd simply like to ask staff, particularly John, with regard to the exemption for government. I mean, just because there's an exemption there, that doesn't really indicate an intent not to comply when.
No, not by any means. I mean, I guess we're not like cities. I mean, we don't have street lights and, those kind of things. And I guess when you look at the other side of it, we don't have any control really on what the schools do. So, I mean, anything that we would, like, put new lights in any of our facilities, that I think there would be a total compliance on our side to try to do that. I mean, I guess example is that the parking deck that's across the street, even though that's in the city, I mean, we did the downward fixtures and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
But is there any reason for not verbalizing it in the wording that county facilities?
That's it. Goes back to, the whole thing of commercial activities new commercial activities was just what we're instructed to do by the Board of Commissioners. I mean, if the board wants us to put language in there, we'd be more than happy to do that.
Once this goes from this committee, though, it would go to the commissioners, and if there is a desire that be addressed at that point, they can certainly refer it back to us.
Oh, sure.
I would suggest that we included that. I mean, I don't see why we wouldn't.
And what you're saying, Joe, is remove the county exemption? Like, add some language that would remove the exemption of the county? Is that what you're saying?
Well, or just say county facilities while you're saying commercial and industrial. Add another category and say county facilities as well. I mean, I just don't see, even to the limit that the commissioners came out and said initially they only wanted commercial lighting controlled. And I appreciate the staff going along with including some other provisions, but I would think if I were the commissioners, I don't know how in the world they could go out and ask for lighting restrictions on other facilities and not do it on county facilities. Just don't think politically that looks real good.
Okay. What else?
I think I was probably the one who brought up the question first about these particular issues in one of our previous meetings. And I think ball fields and government, local government buildings need to be addressed. I mean, that's what I've heard, where you get a lot of complaints. So, I mean, it's not really addressed here specifically enough, I think. So I think it's something to take a look at.
Okay. Josh, got anything? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's going to be impossible to please everybody. And I think we've got a pretty good start on a reasonable ordinance.
I've got a couple, 3 concerns.
Okay.
We hear that there's concern for cost, and based on everything we know, that as Bernie said, with the proliferation of state-of-the-art lighting, that if you go in and purchase a replacement, I'm no expert on this, but I suspect there's not that big, if any, difference in the cost of purchasing a non-conforming light as opposed to a conforming light. They're just becoming more and more and more available, and the technology to produce them is there. One of the things that it's mentioned in the proposed wording, and I'm glad it's there, but we don't talk about it, and that's the savings in energy cost. And this board has not talked about it, the staff has not really talked about it, but I think it needs to be talked about. And that each time we purchase a more efficient light, we put a lesser demand on the grid. We haven't heard a lot about health issues, but it's my understanding there are studies that have proven that there are adverse health issues with light pollution, glare, and so on. I'm a bit puzzled why we can't, I know we don't want to do everything the city does or exactly what the city does, but I'm puzzled why we can't be consistent with the city on this particular situation, so that the lighting standards throughout the county would in fact be standardized. I just don't understand why we do it differently. But the main thing I'm concerned about is that as the proposal currently stands, because of reliance on the non-conforming issues, we'll never be any better off than we are now. So if you go out and look up in the sky, or you walk down the street and look at the glare from the different commercial and industrial buildings, the night sky will never be any better than it is right now. All this proposal does, and I'm not minimizing it, but what this proposal does is simply slow down the rate of getting worse. But we'll never be any better. And that's my main concern. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. Does anyone else have any thoughts? Well, we've got two options, of course. One is to entertain a motion to approve the language that has been published thus far and move forward with the vote and pass it along to the county commissioners for their approval and review. The other is, of course, here today to go back and recraft the language to include some of the concerns that have been mentioned. So I'll ask, I guess, may I hear a motion to approve as presented, or what's your pleasure?
I think we can beat it to death if we want to. I mean, the fact is it's like everything else that's come before this board in the last several years. There's always going to be multiple opinions and multiple focuses. Ultimately, we don't have the ability to enforce this or to do anything with this other than to make a recommendation to the commissioners. And ultimately, the decision is going to be with them. I think we've done what they've asked us to do. If they want to modify it further, then I believe that that's within their capacity to do. From a comment standpoint, folks will have the ability to comment to the commissioners as well. I would make a motion that we approve this as it is and send it on to the commissioners for their consideration and ultimate approval. And I'll make that in the form of a motion, recognizing that that it does meet the statement of consistency with regard to the zoning ordinance, and that they're reasonable in the public interest, and the amendments will establish appropriate standards within that ordinance to regulate lighting in a manner which promotes public safety, and that it's in accordance with the Buncombe County Comprehensive Land Use Plan and its updates.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hughes. So we do have a motion to approve the language that's been published and presented for our consideration here today. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
A second by Mr. Phillips. Okay.
Can I ask one question before we
Please.
vote, Chairman?
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
To the staff. Tell me again, John, about the statements here that are going to talk about government and public. I mean, you're saying that the schools can't be held to the same standards? Will you explain that a little more for me, please?
If you say, government is one thing, but if you say county, the school board's a separate entity.
Right.
I mean, they're separately funded. So,
I mean, it says local, so.
I know that there's an issue about stadium lighting, especially ball field lighting, those kind of things. But, I think we looked at certain ordinances that said, okay, that they've got to cut the lights off after so many minutes after a game and those kind of things. So, I mean, there's a way to regulate those, but just kind of at the situation of how far do we take this thing? And it goes back to what we were directed was, and it was pretty much at the end of a retreat. I think it was the last item that we had, and said, okay, let's just do new commercial. How far do you go with that? I mean, I guess as a planning board can ask to go wherever we want to. I mean, we did talk about residential and those kind of things. So, but to just say, well, Buncombe County government, I don't think that we can let that bleed over to say, well, that's schools or whatever. So, I mean, it's whatever, I guess, the pleasure of the board is what they want to do.
Okay, any further discussion? We do have a motion and a second. Any other? Go
I
ahead.
sort of agree with Scott. I think it's far from perfect, and I think there's some other things that could be done, but it does. We may not be regulating all the things we want to, but of the things we are regulating, that's what I think we were requested to look at. I think we're there going forward. We may need to look at it going backwards now. But for what the charge was, I think we're there.
Okay. Anyone else have any comments while we have it open for discussion?
I think I would agree that we've done what the commissioners want, but personally, I really think it's a big hole not regulating the apartments. I'll vote for the ordinance, but it's a reluctant vote. I really think that this is something that maybe a year down the road we should revisit again. But at least we can get something on the books.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, having heard none, I'll call the vote. All in favor of the motion as presented by Mr. Hughes and seconded by Greg, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no?
No.
Okay, we have one nay and the remaining are ayes. Motion carries. Appreciate everybody's help and participation during this process. And I'm kind of like Bernie. I think at some point in time we may revisit this in the very near future as well. We'll see what the commissioners come up with. And I would encourage you to attend the commissioners meeting. I'm sure you will. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item on our agenda is public comment. Anything you want to talk about? Same rules apply. 3 minutes, identify yourself and where you're from, please. So I'll open that portion of the agenda up. Please.
My name is Dee Dee Stiles, and I live in Swananoa. And my comment is more of a question than it is a comment. Now that we've looked at this lighting thing, and we know that most of the public comment is not about commercial lighting, but is about residential lighting. And we still have this problem of no mobile homes in R1 and R2, where right now that's a lot of what people can afford. A lot of people, that's all a lot of people can afford. And we've seen that come up over and over again, where somebody comes home from the Army, or somebody's children are getting married and they want to put a mobile home for their family to start out on, or their elderly parent needs to move near them and they want to put a mobile home for that. I think, is the process now to go to the county commissioners and to have them ask you to revisit that, or can you revisit that without some kind of directive from the county commissioners?
Well, I'll take a stab at that. John may want to jump in here too. I think we typically proceed as directed by the county commissioners, and we're charged to address subjects such as the lighting ordinance, vacation rentals, et cetera,
Right.
by the county commissioners. I don't know that there's anything out there that says we can't proceed down the road on our own as well. Is that correct, John? Is that fair?
Oh, sure. I mean, it's not that on the same avenue that we put stuff together and come to y'all. So, I mean, there's several different avenues there to take.
Now, but keep in mind, if we choose to do that, for this to become law, the county commissioners is going to have to approve it. So I think we try to walk step in step to the extent we can.
Right.
That
Well,
we're going down the same road.
The first time around with the zoning, they did eventually allow mobile homes in R1 and R2 with a number of restrictions on how they looked and how they were anchored and things like that. So that it just seems like that might be a possibility for the second time, because what I see happening is, instead of allowing the people to have a mobile home in R1 or R2, you're redistricting a big chunk into R3, which allows a whole lot of other stuff that wouldn't be desirable in those neighborhoods.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. I'll close the public comment period then. The only thing left on the agenda is adjournment. I have a motion to adjourn. Anybody want to adjourn?
Let's adjourn.
Okay.
I'll second.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Appreciate your time. See you in January. Have a good